Hello, today I come to you from a library with my presentation for Assignment 2 of History and Philosophy of Education. Now I've chosen to decide and decipher the question in the ways in which education as a human right has changed over time. Initially for this discussion, we need to establish a few key terms in order for us to both understand what is meant when referencing. These three key terms for this multimedia presentation will be founded upon is curriculum, pedagogy and assessment. These are the three key terms in defining education, and they will hold a great deal of importance. So firstly, curriculum. Curriculum is a learning sequence constructed in the context of the needs and aspirations of the society in which it's practiced. The curriculum is fluid and ever-changing, but a topic of interest for those willing to debate. Adhering and following to the ever-changing and growth of what people want and what they're told they need. Essentially, it is a guide of subjects comprising of a course in a school or study, or in a real-life practice. Now, there is much to unpack in this definition. It sounds as if curriculum is something that is open to all, which I think we all know definitely has not been the case until recently in today's society, and certainly not in past times. Education has been given to those with wealth, power, and an extra sort of one-up upon the poor. Certainly in the time of Aristotle and studying under Plato, the two famously said that education was in service of the state, but the state would only allow those with wealth or power to be educated. So, curriculum was a form of education that certainly isn't for all that wish to practice, but rather those lucky enough to be able to practice it. Today, however, with the help of some brilliant initiatives and their contributions to the world, we can give education to those who even still can't afford it. Public schools allow children to get a primary and secondary education for little or no money, and the opportunity for students to attend a private education is still there. Even children in the most remote parts of the world are being educated like never before. It's one example of the ways in which education has changed over time. Next, I'd like to discuss pedagogy. Today, it simply refers to the way educators influence the learning process in which we use. Now, what does this mean? Well, to properly understand this, we must refer to the work of Pablo Freire. Freire was the father of what is known as critical pedagogy and sought to look after the little man in his endeavours. He explains critical pedagogy as an oppression of the lesser educated man and the educator. Freire believed that, however, not all that is knowledge is learnt in the classroom. Educators feel themselves as ignorant and stubborn, much like John Dewey. He believed that reality and the act of gaining knowledge take two very different approaches than the traditional and educational approach, stating that reality must be experienced. Now, this is an example of where education has taken a huge leap forward, and the curriculum has been adjusted depending on the population. Many forms of education do not need a formal pen-to-paper examination, rather a hands-on approach that should be taken, and has been. Forms of internships, tradesmanships are more popular than ever and are recognised forms of education. Assessment ties closely and is often the last part of pedagogy and curriculum. Assessment in many ways is a scaling system. We see examples of that woven through many pastimes and societies. Research on assessment has been conducted just recently. It was said that the best form of interpreting the data was through a pen and paper exam. Upon review, we have found that this is not the case. Forward thinking, such as Brady and Kennedy, are leading the direction in which people seem to be following. In their book, Curriculum Construction, they discuss the ideas of assessment and deconstruct the validity of the system. Before this kind of study, little consideration was put to see if the system was valid. And though it may seem like a mammoth task, questioning the history of it is the only true way for progression to occur. In their book, Brady and Kennedy state that for an assessment to be considered valid, it needs to measure what it has intended to measure. This ties closely with the work of Dewey, Freire, Aristotle, and most of the respective philosophers to date. It seems to be something that they have all been subtly mentioning, yet no change has occurred, because in doing so it would raise much more of a frightening question that is much harder to deconstruct. That one being, is our education really working?